What's up, guys? Tim Little, Matt Allen. Welcome back to TacticalBassin. Today's video number 3 in our first annual spring gear buyer's guide series. Today we're talking hard baits that you need to be throwing throughout the spring season.
Today is all about hard baits. Now, we combined hard baits with wire baits, for lack of a better term, just to get them all into one video. Basically, all the reaction categories that we throw in spring. So, deep cranks, mids, square bills, lipless, chatterbaits, spinnerbaits, a little bit of topwater, swim baits, Arigs, all those categories, one video. Every one of these is a video in and of itself, right? We can do a dedicated video on each subject, and on a lot of them we have. But today is about helping you quickly grab the best of the best from each category. So in the video description, we will link all of these with our personal favorite colors for each one. So if something stands out to you, you think, yeah, I want to try that. If you go look, we'll give you our top couple of colors for every single one of them. Let's just take it from the top. Where do you want to begin? Just grab and go. Pick a category.
I'm gonna go, I guess we'll work left to right.
All right.
Yeah, this is actually, believe it or not, it's fairly hard to narrow down hard baits. You know, there's so many baits on the market, so many good baits on the market, but again, the buyer's guides, we want to just cut out everything and simplify it for you. So we went through, brainstorm, you know, what are the top techniques, the techniques that Matt and I use throughout this spring transition into spring, the spawn, and really trying to narrow it down and just pick the really standout baits in each category. Shoot, let's start with deep diving crankbaits.
Fire away.
This is gonna seem lame, but it's starting.
Hey, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah. So, gonna go with our tactical DD crank. Now, you guys know that we designed this bait several years ago, prototyped it for many years. A lot of big fish have been caught on this bait, and we specifically designed it for cold water cranking. Although it works in your warmer weather months, the tactical DD crank is just a real tight wobble bait, but it really targets that 12 to 18 foot, you know, dive depth. But specifically this guy right here, we love throwing red in the spring. There's just something about red. I think you did a video on it a few weeks ago, but there's just something about red that really shines, really works well in the next upcoming months. Yeah. Really shines this time of the year. But the tactical DD crank, it's just, if your fish are transitioning from those main lake points back to the spawning bays and you're fishing those secondary points and you really need to get down in that 12 to 18 foot, start with a deep diving crankbait. You can move a little quicker than, let's say, you know, a finesse bait, and you can really trigger those fish. If you see them down there, you get that bait deflecting. There's something to be said about a crankbait when other baits won't work. You get that kind of reaction bite. You can trigger those fish and make them eat even though they don't want to. But this bait right here, specifically designed for us to fish right now.
Two more for you. These are mid cranks. What that means is they're not a square bill, they're not a shallow crank, but they're not a deep diver either. As those fish are making their move, as they're jumping secondary points, as they're moving into the backs of pockets, fishing that mid-range becomes really important. So two here, this is a Spro rock crawler. This is the Rapala DT series. This is the DT8. Both of those baits shine pre-spawn. Those fish are making their moves. They get on those key structures. You can run down through there and pick those fish off very easily. I won't go any more in depth than that because we've got so much to cover.
Yes,
I'll leave it right there.
So much to cover. And each of these baits, each of these techniques, like Matt said, could have its own specific video. So we're going to kind of move through this quickly. Maybe if we have room, we'll link some videos where we talk about each technique specifically. If not,
we may not even have the room. We'll see.
Next two baits. Are we doing two baits at a time now?
Yeah. Okay. Talk about square bills. I'll talk about flat sides.
Okay. Two square bills for you. Got the biggie and the scamp. What really sets these two baits, obviously the colors are almost, you know, you can see the pattern in a lot of these. What really sets these baits apart is the sound. You know, the biggie, that real kind of loud knock, and then the scamp,
is ridiculous.
Just a really loud bait. This time of the year, again, we're throwing red, but a lot of times you get those early spring or late spring, depending on where you are in the country, those storms that kind of come in, kind of murk up the water, but sound, it helps those fish track that bait. That scamp is a super loud, almost like a tinny kind of sound, whereas that biggie is that kind of knocker sound. But both awesome square bills, not too expensive, come in great colors. But those are going to be our 2 square bills that we recommend for you guys.
Flat sides. Flat sides come into play in early spring. So some of the southern guys, you're already too late for this information. Guys in the middle of the country, this is for you, and guys farther north, you know it's coming. Spro, Little John, and then Rapala, the Aughts Garage Crank, the Slim, okay? These 2 are flat-sided baits, so they're shallow diving, essentially square bills, although they're not a square bill, but they're flat-sided cranks. These shine when that water is just a little bit colder. That early pre-spawn, these just flat get those fish, and then we transition into those traditional square bills.
Yeah, a lot like the crank. It's that tighter wobble. It's just that gets more bites in the colder water months. You going lipless?
Why don't you just jam through all 3 lipless, and I'll talk about both blade baits.
Okay. Lipless. You guys know we typically in the spring.
Do you throw a lipless?
A little bit.
Is that a bait you like?
A little bit. You can see this one. The red's worn off the hooks, the teeth marked. I mean, you got almost the scales worn off this bait. The split rings are almost bent out. But you guys know that we love throwing a lipless, specifically that hopping technique. You know, not necessarily the cast out and burn back. We're throwing them more like a jig. We're kind of fluttering them off bottom, let them fall. Hands down, our favorite. The LV500, that 3/4 ounce bait, triggers those bites on that quicker fall. I don't even know how many double-digit fish we've caught on this specific bait, but a lot. You know, that is our staple. The LV500, guys are finally kind of picking it up out here in the South and stuff. They're learning about it, but that's a must-have. Again, you're just lifting that rod tip enough to feel that bait vibrate and then flutter back down, and you will get some of the hardest jig bites you've ever had on a lipless crankbait. Another one right here, this is the Jackal TN70. Another great bait, just a different sound. LB500, TN70. This does come in a 1 knocker, but we prefer the normal, the traditional. The TN70, there's been days where can't get bit on the LV, and then you pick up the TN70 and they blast money. It. So it's always good, just like the square bills and other baits, it's always good to have baits that have a little different sound to them. You know, it's just some of those days they eat one better than the other. So the TN70 is another great bait. And then something that's a bait that really works, that doesn't break the bank, super loud. This is the Super Spot.
Yep.
It's
Cotton Cordell.
Yeah, Cotton Cordell Super Spot. Pretty inexpensive in the category.
It's got to be the least expensive bait sitting out here by far.
Yeah, you do want to change out your hooks and split rings, but it's a lighter bait. It falls a little bit slower, but it's really loud and it doesn't break the bank. And I know you've caught some really big fish just fishing this thing around grass.
Yeah, for the budget guy, the guy who just wants to try a lipless, the guy who's fan casting grass flats, the guy who's fishing a pond, you're fishing shallow. That thing gets them, and it's cheap. All right, I'm going to transition to blade baits. Now, blade baits in the spring, we're actually talking about the exact same thing. I'll fish a blade bait interchangeably with a lipless. The difference is a blade bait is a piece of stamped metal, no sound of any kind, just vibration. One day they want one day they want the other. That's just how it works. So 2 that are the standouts for me, my main staples, if you will, Demiki Vault, and then the Megabass, the Dyna Response. These 2 baits, day in and day out, just flat catch them. The Dyna Response has this feathered tail on it, so it's a tighter wobble, whereas the Vault is a much wider, harder thumping wobble or vibration. And I tie both of them on every time I go on a blade bait bite, and I just see which one they want on a given day. But the blade bait, it used to be a cold water winter thing. We've talked about this. As these colors have changed, as the baits have changed, they've become a 4-season bait. You want them in your lineup all the time. They just consistently catch fish.
Yeah, it's almost like, for me personally, I don't know about you, don't want to speak for you, but if I am on a lipless bite or I'm on a square bill bite, I'm going to have a lipless tied on, and I'm also going to have a blade bait tied on, because
Agreed.
there are days when you will blitz them on a blade and you can't get bit on an LV or a different rattle bait, and vice versa. So you definitely, for me, if I'm fishing this time of the year, I have all 3 tied on. Where are we going from here?
Chatterbaits. Here, you talk about that one. I'll talk about this one.
All right.
Keep it simple, right? There's like 50 different chatterbaits that we like. There really are. There's so many trailers, so many baits, but we narrowed it down to 2 standouts for spring.
2 standouts for spring. Hopefully you guys have been following along our channel. I think last year, you said last year was the year of the chatterbait for you. This year already is starting off to be the year of the chatterbait for me. I have so much confidence in this specific bait right here. That is the jackhammer. Specifically, that's green pumpkin shad, and that is paired up with the 5.5 spunk shad. You know, the chatterbait is just one of those baits that really shines 10, 12 months out of the year, pretty much, depending on where you are.
I know.
But really around grass. You know, in a body of water where you have the new grass coming up, water's warming up, grass is coming up. You know, you start throwing that lipless crank, you kind of get hung up in it. The chatterbait really shines in and around the grass edge, the tops of the grass. But that guy right there, the jackhammer with that 5.5 spunk shad, can't go wrong with it. So far this year, my biggest fish of the year has come on the chatterbait.
I want to talk about this little guy. This one came out at ICAST last year. This is their little Mini Max. They released 2 baits at ICAST. They released the Mini Max and the Big Blade. Everyone else freaked out about the Big Blade. I freaked out about the Mini Max. It's been a long time coming. So it's a downsized chatterbait. Way smaller profile, way smaller hook. Now, there's always been a small chatterbait, but this is the first time that they did a small profile with an actual heavy wire hook. It's small, but it's heavy wire. And I've been waiting for that bait, because there are a lot of times, spring, fall, bass push bait fish ends up in the shallow water, but they're little bait fish. It's not always big giant shad. Sometimes it's little tiny pond smelt, or little shad, or little bluegills,
maybe
little
crappie.
Yeah. That small profile is everything. And this is the first time that they've done it with a bait where I was confident if I throw back in a little pocket and stick a 12-pounder, I've got a shot of getting her. I'm not just going to get,
thinking.
Boom, folded out. Hey.
12-pounder. Couldn't be a 6-pounder. It had to be a 12-pounder.
You got to be prepared, bud. You got to be prepared for success. So that little guy is just, it has a place in my lineup now. So I paired that up with that big bite, the Kamikaze Swim On, that double tail trailer. You guys have seen in the underwater footage, it looks unbelievable. It's just a fantastic combo. Why don't we split these up? Why don't I go here, you go one of these.
Okay. Yeah,
Take your pick and go for it.
Glidebaits. Recently, I think I did my favorite baits for March. Did spring, where the bass go and how to catch them. You guys know that a glide bait is a staple for myself, probably you as well. I know we've done damage in the past together on glide baits, but we really wanted to narrow it down. You know, there's so many good glide baits on the market, so many good swim baits on the market that we had to kind of pick and choose and narrow it down to what we had confidence in and what was available, what was readily available. So we're gonna start off here. I mean, look at the paint is like beat off of this thing. This is the S-Waver 168, and yes, there are more expensive glide baits on the market, you know, one-offs and stuff. But if you're looking for a mass-produced bait that's readily available and catches big ones, swims good, this guy right here, the S-Waver 168. We got a few different colors that we like to recommend, but this is just like, this is a staple. I mean, I just threw one in Florida. I mean, I have access. I own other baits, but I just tend to, my confidence, if I'm going to a new fishery and I want to see if they'll eat a glide bait, I always start here. You know, you can catch 2-pound largemouth, you can catch 12-pound largemouth.
Oh, now you talk about 12-pounders.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, we have on this bait, not on that really. But, you know, that guy right there is, that is my #1 confidence glide bait. If I need to see if they'll eat a glide bait, or I'm fishing a new fishery and I want to see the caliber of fish in there.
Yeah.
Next up is going to be the Sneaky Pete. This bait really shines for me in moving water. You know, here we're on the TVA, get a lot of moving water current. I know we've caught a lot of stuff back on the West Coast, a lot of big fish stuff, a lot of big fish back on the West Coast in current with this Sneaky Pete, but also calm water. But it really shines. You can get real erratic with this guy. It does have some cool features. It's got the spinning hook hangers, but the Sneaky Pete is a little bit bigger than the S-Waver. It's not a bait that you need specific swim bait gear for, per
like
se.
that's the limit of where you can get away with it.
Right, you can get away with your heavy jig rod, something like that. But that guy right there really shines if you want something a little bit bigger, a little bit more twitchy, and something to fish in current. And this guy right here, this is the Gantrel.
That's the baby.
Tiny,
the junior.
The junior. I know there's been a few different ones, but this guy, it's actually a 3-piece hard bait. And if you're on a fishery that the fish are really targeting bluegill, baby crappie, this bait really shines. It's something that doesn't sink very quickly. It's something you can fish over the tops of the grass, but it's a different profile than the glide baits. It has a real kind of tight swim, but that guy right there, we've done damage on lakes where the fish were really keying in on bluegill. Those smaller crappie, smaller bluegill, that guy right there. So we threw that one in there as well.
All right, I'm going to talk spinnerbaits. And I want to interject here really quickly that as I'm looking around, I notice that there is not a jerkbait on this deck in the middle of hard baits. That's what the video description is for. So in the video description, we will also add the jerkbait category. I mean, I could already tell you offhand, the new Shimano, the Jackal, and a Vision 110. Right, boom, boom, boom. There they are. That's what's going to be there. Springtime, pre-spawn. That's the deal. But that's just the way it goes when you're looking at this many baits. I was sitting here, I'm listening to you talk about glide baits, and sometimes we fish a 168 on the same bite that we throw a jerk bait, and I'm like, where are the jerk baits?
Yeah, I've talked about that in some of my recent videos. For me, confidence-wise, do I pick up a 110 or do I pick up a 168? And for me, I feel like the smaller glide baits target the same fish as the jerk bait, that same depth range. Those fish, they're down looking up. But for me, I just have more confidence in the glide. But yeah, the glide, the jerk bait are interchangeable.
All right, let's talk spinnerbaits. Spinnerbaits, again, kept it as simple as I could. I lean towards more natural profiled spinnerbaits. So smaller spinnerbaits, smaller blades, softer wire. That's the way I lean with the spinnerbait. The spinnerbait is an absolute confidence bait for me in spring. If I get any color in that water whatsoever, I have a spinnerbait tied on. So 3 of them for you. The smallest of the bunch, Megabass, the SV3. That guy, the smallest blades, smallest overall profile, small hook, so I can get away with lighter line. And then you can also fish this. It's got these longer tails on it, so you can fish it with or without a trailer. If you're gonna run a trailer, you take those tails off of it, but you can fish it without.
It looks really good without.
It does, it looks really good. So that little guy is just that, I know they should eat a spinnerbait, but the water's a little cleaner than I want, I go here immediately. From there, we've got the Damiki. This guy, they're larger blades, significantly larger, but they're still not full-size blades, but they're paper thin. The blades are. As a result, I can go slower with it. So springtime, fish go shallow, they get around cover, we get these floods of water, and the fish move up on the bank to feed. I can get right in and around that cover with the spinnerbait, and I can go really slow with that guy right there and just roll right by that cover. I fish it with a 4.3 Kitech on the back. That's the size that I like on there. It just completes that profile and allows me to pluck those fish off. And because I fish a swim bait on the back, I don't have to fish a stinger hook. The swim bait itself becomes the target. They aim for it, they eat it whole. Without it, sometimes they eat the blades and you need a stinger hook to hook them. Put that swim bait on there, fish it with no stinger hook, and the thing becomes unbelievably weedless. You can throw it back over the top of bushes and just roll it back through there, and those fish will pick it off, and it'll come up and through wood and through grass. And then last, Terminator. This is my full-size spinnerbait, if I could just grab one. Very, very soft wire. Again, that's key for me. I like a bait day in and day out. There are exceptions, but day in and day out, I like those softer wired spinnerbaits because I think I get more vibration out of them. So this is my full size. So true full size blades, full size hook, great keeper system. And again, I put a 4.3 Kitech on the back of that and just slow roll it, trying to get those big, lazy fish that are up sunning themselves in that cooler water.
I'll do these two. You want to do that one? I know you like,
yeah,
like that bait. We're going to talk a little bit about topwater. It's early spring, pre-spawn, fish are moving up shallow. You got to have topwater in this video. So the two baits for me, last year was really the bait, the Whopper Popper 110. It was the year of the 110. Caught some really big largemouth, some really big smallmouth on the 110. And the only thing I can think about is the sound. You know, it's not the full-size 130 Whopper Plopper, and a lot of guys are throwing that. So changing up the size, changing up the sound just a little bit. That 110, you know, I'm not going to go out and throw this all day this time of the year. If I get to certain areas, if there's grass coming up just under the surface, I want to check that grass patch. I'm not just chucking and winding this all day, but if I come to certain areas that just feels right with topwater, I'll pick up the Whopper Plopper. The 110 specifically, like I said, it's just a different sound. It's still a fairly substantial topwater bait, considering, you know, in the category, but it's just a different sound, like I said, than the 130. So the 110, and this guy right here, this is the Megabass, the Pop Max.
Yep.
Obviously you can see just beautiful colors, but for me out here 2 years ago, I couldn't get bit on any other topwater than this popper right here. It's just something in the matte shad color. It's just something about these fish. They wanted that bait. Couldn't get bit on the smaller one. I had to go with the
right.
With the
had to be
one.
the Pop Max.
Pop Max. So this guy, as far as a popper, again, you see that grass coming up, you see that overhang by the dock, whatever it may be, and it just feels like topwater. Throwing that popper in there, you're not covering too much. You know, you're not bringing that bait too quickly away from the strike zone, the area that those fish are going to be in. The popper, you can just sit there and bloop, bloop. You know, it's just, you could walk it. This is a very universal popper. Walks really well. It leaves a bubble trail with the holes in the mouth right there. But this guy right here, if I have to throw a popper, I'm going to go with the Pop Max.
I threw this one in. So this is the River to Sea Bubble Walker. This is the big one. It's the 128, and it's big. I mean, look at it compared to like a
popper.
Yeah, because even the Pop Max is a big popper.
It's big.
That's bigger than a normal popper. Look at the size difference here. It's huge, right? This is a springtime bait for me. I catch them March, April, May on this bait, and then I don't throw it again until the next year. It's a popper, but I fish it as a walking bait. I very rarely use it like a popper. I walk it like a traditional walking bait, but because it has the giant cupped face on it, it doesn't glide like this, like a walking bait. All it does is it just sits there and goes like this, right in place. The back end almost just swivels, doesn't even move. It just creeps towards the boat. It's a big, big profile, moving really slowly over those fish's heads.
And it's loud.
It's loud. When I want a giant bite, that's what I throw. Again, like Tim said, you're not throwing it all day. You're looking for one fish when I switch to this. But I have caught that one fish many, many times when I needed to. It has worked over and over again to get me that one random 5 to 8 pound bite. That just, okay, I've had a great day. Maybe I can get a monster. Kaboom! There she is. It just blows my mind. Where it's really shined for me is warmer fisheries. So the southern fisheries or western fisheries like the California Delta, where the fish will get on the weed edge and you can line that cast up, and now you've got 75 feet right down a weed edge, and you're just barely walking down that edge right in place. It just gets them.
All right, last but not least, the Arig. How do you want to split this up?
Doesn't matter. I'll take that one right there.
You know, it's funny that we're ending on this because out of all these, this is my #1 spring bait, especially searching, trying to figure where those schools of fish have transitioned to, where they've moved from their winter haunt to where they're going. You got to find them in between the spawning areas. And something about the Arig, you know, it's the best bait for mimicking a ball of bait fish. It really is. And you get to cover a lot of water. So if you're searching that point to point to point, finding where those fish are through that transition from their winter areas to where they're spawning, the Arig is something you just cast and burn. And you just cover water until you find either the fish, the bait fish, or key like structure, cover, that sort of stuff where you can slow down and pick it apart with different things. But the Arig, so many big fish on it, so many multiple fish on it. You know, these fish are fired up. They're looking to feed up, get bulked up for the spawn. And the Arig, it's just my #1 bait. Probably #1, then Glidebait, then Lipless. But bladed, non-bladed, this is actually our tactical flex rig. This is a rig that we designed for a long time. Lighter wire, more movement in the rig itself. Comes in bladed and non-bladed. I don't want to completely talk about the whole thing. I'll let you kind of jump in.
Well, that's the gist of it. So day in and day out, we throw bladed. If you find that your water has gotten really, really clear, or there are a lot of people throwing an Arig, or you just notice that you're getting short strikes, you're reeling that rig along and you feel the rig get light. That means that a fish ran by it or ran through it and that wall of water pushed it. And you'll feel that while you're reeling. If those things are happening, cut the bladed off, go to the non-bladed. Way more subtle, incredible movement when you hop it and pop that rod, and it will just catch those fish that other rigs won't. But again, day in and day out, throw blades, that full profile, all that flash, all that movement, they just eat it up. And I'm with you, it is #1 in the springtime. It just catches fish. You want to wrap us up?
Yeah, so there it is, guys. That is our kind of hodgepodge of the best hard baits for each category. These are the baits to go out and get right now while there's still inventory. We all know how that
it's another one of those
the last
years.
Couple years. But this was a hard video to do, to really narrow down each category, because there are so many good baits on the market, and I'm sure we've left out quite a few, but these guys right here are staples in our arsenal. Doesn't matter if you're deep cranking, square billing, A-rigging, topwater, these are the baits that we have confidence in and that we recommend for you guys. Guys, we hope you liked this video. If you did, give us a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe. What video do we have next up in the Buyer's Guide series?
Tomorrow will be soft baits.
Soft baits. So hard baits. Tomorrow will be soft baits. Gonna be another long-winded one. But the guys, you know, we get so many comments. Hey, which crankbait should I buy, or which this should I buy? And so that's why we're doing this series. It's just answering all the questions in the comments with a series, just a spring series to help you guys get the gear you need for the spring season into fall. So there it is, guys. Appreciate you watching. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you tomorrow.